So for the task 2, we are going to create an in-memory storage for section ID, meaning that when our app is running, the storage will persist across all sections until we stop our app. And this in-memory storage is going to be a dictionary. And like we are told, the name is going to be user ID by section ID, and it's going to be a dictionary. Then next is we are going to create this method that will create the section ID for users. And then it's going to take in self user ID, which is a string and is equal to none, and it's going to return none or a string. So we are going to add the check and say if there is no user ID or this user ID is not an instance of a string. If it's not an instance of a string, we are going to return none. Then if the check should pass, that is user ID is provided and the user ID is a string, then we are going to use this UUID module to generate a unique identification token and set it as session ID. So we say section ID is equal to UUID4, and we need this to be a string, so we are going to typecast it as a string. And then after that, we are going to use the section ID as a key to set the user ID as a value in this in-memory storage. So we are going to say self.user ID by section ID, and then we pass in the session ID we just generated as a key, and then we set the user ID as the value, and then finally we return section ID. And we are going to test it here. We have a user ID which is a string, and here if we pass it to this create section method that we just created, the create section method will check if it's provided. If it's a string, it's going to then generate a UUID and then set it as session ID and use the session ID as a key, and then the user ID will be saved as the value. So let's go ahead and test this. So this is my test file. So right here we are importing the session out, and we are creating an instance of the session authentication, and we are creating the type of the in-memory dictionary, and then we are creating the in-memory dictionary, and here we are setting the user ID as none, which we know that this create section is going to check if the user ID is none. If it's none, so it's going to return none. So here user ID is an integer, it's going to return none because user ID is not a string. So here user ID is a string and it's passed to create section, and we are putting the user ID and then followed by this arrow, and then we are printing the section which is the UUID string, and then we are printing the user ID by section ID, which is the in-memory dictionary, which is the in-memory storage, which is a dictionary. So same here, etc. Should be this one. And here we have it. You see that this when user ID is none, we are going to get none. When the user ID is integer, we are going to be returning none. User ID is a string, is returned, and so on and so forth. So now after creating this section ID with the so now after creating this section ID by passing the user ID to this method and storing the user ID in the in-memory storage and using the section ID as a key, we are going to be creating another method that will use this same section ID to retrieve this user ID from this in-memory storage. So the method user ID for section ID is going to be checking in the section ID, and again it's going to go through this same check, but only this time we are going to be checking for if section ID is provided and if it's a string. If any of these checks should fail, we are going to return none. If the check pass, we are going to be passing this section ID as a key to the in-memory to this in-memory storage. So we are going to say user ID is equal to self dot user by ID, and then we use the dot get method, and then we pass in the section ID as a key. So this dot get method is going to retrieve the user ID if this section ID exists as a key in the in-memory dictionary. If it doesn't, it's going to return none. And then after this, we are going to return the user ID. And again, we are going to have to test this.
So here we are creating a section ID by passing a user ID, which is a string, to this create section method, which we know is going to create a section ID and save this user ID in the in-memory storage, and then return the section ID. And same thing here. So we are creating two section IDs, that's section 1 and section 2. So here we are testing for our check. So this is going to return none because the temporary section ID that we passed here it doesn't have a value, is none. Same here, this one is an integer, so it's going to return none. And here we are passing a section ID, but we didn't create anything like doesn't exist as a user ID. Just like here, we only did two here, and this doesn't exist, is not amongst these two. And then for this part, we are passing the temporary session ID as the session ID we first created here. Created the section ID 1, excuse me, section ID 1 and section ID 2. So we are going to use it to retrieve the user ID by passing it to the method that we just created. So we pass it to it. So we are expecting it to return the user ID. Same thing here, we're passing the section ID 2 to it. We're expecting a user ID. And then where is this user ID 1? Okay, so the first excuse me, user ID that we used to create a section ID, we are taking it and we are passing it here also to see if we are going to be able to retrieve the same section ID. So here we generated the section ID for the first one. For these first two, we generated the section ID, and here we are getting none for these two, or for the three, none and none, because here this section ID doesn't exist, so we're getting three none, and then followed by this part where we are fetching the user ID by passing the temporary section ID that we created in the first one, which are these two, and so on and so forth.
For the fourth task, we are going to this API slash v1 slash auth/auth.py, and you are going to be adding another method that will take a request and return the cookie value from the request. So to be able to get this cookie value, we have to get the cookie name from the environment variable called section name. So, but before we do that, we are going to check if request is provided. If it's not provided, we return none. And then we are going to retrieve the section name from the environmental variable. So we are going to use the getEnv method, and then we are going to pass in section name, which is the name of the env variable, and then we are going to set cookie as request dot cookies dot. We use the get method, and then we pass in the name from the env, which is section name, and then we return the cookie. Of course, we are going to have to import this. Then let's go and test this first. To test this, we have to use this. Which one is it? Maybe this one. Yeah, we have to use this as our app so that we can be able to try this part. And then here we are returning we are calling the auth.section cookie, and then we are passing the request to it. And then here you are setting the environmental variable section name as my section ID, which means this is the name of the cookie. And then we have to, let's start this. Then I'm going to be using Thunder client, and here we are setting a cookie, setting the name of the cookie as this, and setting the value as hello. So hopefully when we make a request here, this route is going to use the method that we created to go and retrieve the cookie value for us. So when I make this call, I'm expecting to get hello. Say cookie value none. Let me see. Now request return this. Let me see. I'll make this call here and see. And see, we are getting the value hello. So am I not setting the cookie right here? That is a tiny one. Let's see. Getting now. When I make this call, I'm not sure why I'm getting no here, but if I should go here and say manage cookies, I see that I'm getting the cookie hello, which I sent. I'm not sure why I'm getting none there.
that.
So let me try this again. Still getting none. Maybe it's because of the way I'm doing this. Let me take this off. And okay, guess it was because of the way I was setting the cookie name and value. So we are getting hello.